What if I told you that even Elvis Presley, the famous rock and roll singer, once had his heart broken by someone he could never forget? When Elvis was super famous, he fell in love with a beautiful movie actress. He was sure she was the one he wanted to marry. But many years later, when she was 92 years old, she finally told everyone why she said no to him. And the real reason is more surprising than anyone thought. She didn't say no because she didn't want to be with a superstar or because she didn't like being famous. It was because she already loved someone else. A secret love story that Elvis couldn't beat. Being rejected hurt Elvis so badly that he later married a woman who looked almost exactly like her. It was like he was trying to find the woman he had lost. This is the story nobody knew about Debra Paget, the Hollywood movie star who broke Elvis Presley's heart and made a choice that changed his whole life forever. Deborah Lee Griffin was born in 1933. From the day she was born, it seemed like she was meant to be a star. Her mom used to be an actress and really wanted her daughter to make it big in show business. From when Deborah was very little, her mom's big dreams shaped her whole life. This meant she was learning about acting and dealing with Hollywood pressure way before most kids could even understand what that meant. Her growing up was filled with trying out for parts, getting lessons, and always looking for new roles. There wasn't much time for her to just be a normal kid. When she was only 14 years old, all her hard work, or maybe her mom's pushing, got her a contract with 20th Century Fox. This was the real start of her job as an actress. Getting this deal when she was so young was really amazing, but it also threw her right into the tough and sometimes mean world of Hollywood. She was suddenly working with studio bosses, directors, and other actors who had been doing this for years. One role could decide what would happen to her whole future. Her first big movie role happened in 1948 in a film called Cry of the City. She was just 14 years old, but she had to act alongside grown-up actors in a story with lots of heavy emotions and drama. One of the most memorable and shocking parts of her first movie was her first kiss on screen with an actor who was much older than her. This scene would have been considered pretty wild because of how young she was. It showed both how talented she was for her age and how much pressure young actresses had to deal with in Hollywood back then. It was a moment that showed how hard it was to balance being an innocent kid with the adult things the movie business expected from her. Even though she was so young, she handled these tough situations like a real professional. This showed she had the potential to become something special and set up what would become a career that got a lot of public attention. Her early experiences, shaped by a determined mom and a demanding studio system, didn't just make her famous. They also taught her how to be strong and calm under pressure. These became the things she was known for throughout her career. These early years, filled with people watching her closely and being exposed to adult situations way too early, were super important in making her the actress she was meant to become. In the 1950s, Deborah Lee Griffin's career really started to take off. She became famous for her striking and unusual looks, which Hollywood studios quickly called exotic. This special look got her lots of different roles, but it also came with a big cost. Studios often put her in parts that focused on how different she looked from typical leading ladies. They made her play characters from different ethnic backgrounds, even when it didn't make sense historically or culturally. These roles showed both how fascinated the industry was with her beauty and how insensitive they were about race back then. One of her biggest early roles came in 1950 with a Western movie called Broken Arrow. In it, she played a young Native American girl opposite James Stewart, who was 42 years old at the time. Deborah was only 16, which made their pairing on screen really controversial, even for that time period. The movie emphasized how innocent and young her character was, creating a weird and uncomfortable contrast with her much older co-star. The big age difference, along with the movie's story, brought attention to how Hollywood was okay with putting very young actresses in roles with romantic or sexual themes. This was something that would later get criticized for being wrong. To convincingly play these ethnically coded roles, Debra had to go through physically uncomfortable changes. She had to darken her skin and wear brown contact lenses that often made it hard for her to see and caused her a lot of discomfort. These demands showed the extreme things actresses back then had to do to meet the strict and often problematic standards of studio casting. Despite these challenges, she gave performances that were both believable and compelling. This showed her professionalism and determination at such a young age. Her career reached its highest point in 1956 with two major films that would make her a permanent part of Hollywood history. The first was Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments, which gave her a role in a huge epic movie. This showed she could hold her own with a huge cast and spectacular production. That same year, she starred in Love Me Tender alongside Elvis Presley. This film not only brought her into the world of one of the most iconic figures of that time, but also introduced her to a whole new generation of fans. Both films were hits with critics and audiences, making her reputation solid as a talented and versatile actress. She could handle both epic historical ditties, dramas, and contemporary popular entertainment. Her path in the 1950s combined amazing opportunities with intense scrutiny and physical strain. This reflected both the glamour and the darker realities of Hollywood stardom. She became a figure who symbolized the tensions of that era, celebrated for her beauty and talent, yet shaped by the industry's sometimes exploitative practices. Despite her success and the recognition she gained on screen, Deborah Lee Griffin's time in Hollywood was far from glamorous. Behind the spotlight, she often felt weighed down by personal struggles that slowly drained her passion for acting. Many of her roles put her in predictable stereotypes, most often as the damsel in distress. While audiences admired her beauty and presence, she longed for deeper, more meaningful characters that could truly challenge her as an actress. Instead, the repetition left her frustrated with a lingering feeling that her talent was being overlooked. Another burden she carried was the way the industry shaped her image at a young age. She later admitted to feeling disturbed when she discovered that many teenagers saw her as a pin-up figure. The realization that her carefully crafted screen persona was being consumed in such an objectifying way deeply unsettled her. It only reinforced her belief that Hollywood valued her more as a fantasy than as a genuine person or artist. When she stepped away from acting, Debra found a new direction in life. She experienced a profound spiritual awakening and became a devoted Christian, eventually sharing her faith as a host on the Trinity Broadcasting Network, TBN. This chapter of her life allowed her to connect with people on a much deeper level, away from the relentless scrutiny of fame. For Debra, the transition from Hollywood starlet to a woman of faith symbolized resilience, self-discovery, and the pursuit of authenticity in a world that often demanded otherwise. Deborah Lee Griffin's relationship with Howard Hughes stands as one of the most sensational and closely watched chapters of her life. It showed the often blurred lines between power, wealth, and personal entanglement in Golden Age Hollywood. Hughes was already famous for being eccentric, incredibly wealthy, and having exact control over his business and personal life. He reportedly took a particular interest in Debra during the height of her early career. The relationship was both glamorous and risky, placing her in the world of one of the most powerful and unpredictable men in America. Sources suggest that Hughes's fascination with Debra went beyond the typical support common in Hollywood at the time. He showered her with expensive gifts, creating an image of romantic allure and material indulgence. Yet this generosity came with hidden strings attached. Hughes's controlling tendencies reportedly extended to her professional life. He had the power to influence casting decisions, production priorities, and even studio publicity. His favor or disfavor could make or break a rising star. Debra, still in her teens and navigating the pressures of fame, was caught between the opportunity for career advancement and the personal complexities of being linked to such a dominant figure. Her involvement with Hughes also dramatically intersected with her personal life and romantic prospects. One of the most notable consequences was her decision to turn down a proposal from Elvis Presley, who was smitten with her after their work together on Love Me Tender. Reports indicate that her relationship with Hughes, combined with her parents' objections, played a central role in this choice. The decision underscored the complicated dynamics she faced balancing youthful attraction, parental influence, and the career implications of entanglement with a man like Hughes. It is widely believed that Hughes' presence in her life may have limited her romantic freedom while simultaneously offering her opportunities and protection in an industry notorious for exploitation. Being involved with Howard Hughes placed Debra at the intersection of power, celebrity, and scandal. The relationship was emblematic of Hollywood's darker undercurrents, the intense scrutiny faced by young actresses, the ways wealth and influence could manipulate careers, and the personal sacrifices demanded to maintain success in an unforgiving studio system. For Debra, it was a period of both fascination and tension, illustrating how the allure of glamour often came bundled with constraints that were as psychologically taxing as they were publicly invisible. Beyond the controversy of the pin-up photos that deeply troubled her, Debra Paget's early career was shaped in ways that today would raise serious ethical concerns. Under the Hollywood studio system, her image was carefully designed to balance between innocence and sensuality, a duality that both boosted her popularity and stirred criticism. This wasn't accidental, but a deliberate theme woven into her roles. For example, in Broken Arrow, her character Morning Star was portrayed with a focus on her youthful beauty, creating a dynamic where she was admired not only by the much older leading man, James Stewart, but also by the audience. The troubling aspect wasn't explicit content, but the way the narrative placed a young woman on the edge of adulthood into situations where her desirability was emphasized, often opposite men far older than her. This pattern continued throughout her early work. From her very first appearance at 14, Paget was repeatedly cast in roles where her characters were objects of attraction for men significantly older. The studios, and by extension the cultural standards of that era, benefited from presenting her as an exotic fantasy figure, even while she was still legally under her mother's guardianship on set. For Paget, this created a painful inner struggle. She longed for strong, meaningful roles like those given to stars like Marilyn Monroe. Yet, she was continually confined to playing the beautiful but passive damsel, a figure designed more to decorate the screen than to drive the story. This professional commodification of her youth and sexuality seemingly bled into her personal life, which became a subject of public fascination and whispered speculation. Her series of short-lived marriages, first to singer David Street in 1958, lasting a mere 3 months, then to director Bud Boeticher in 1960, ending after just 22 days, and finally to Ling Kung, a descendant of Confucius, with whom she had a son before divorcing in 1980, painted a public picture of romantic instability. To contemporary observers, these rapid failed unions suggested a frantic search for an anchor, a stability that was desperately lacking in her controlled and exploitative professional world. The intense pressure of fame, coupled with the psychological impact of being a product since childhood, often leaves individuals ill-equipped to form lasting, healthy personal relationships, and Paget's marital history seems to reflect this common tragedy of child stars. Furthermore, in the ruthlessly strategic environment of studio-era Hollywood, it was widely understood that relationships were rarely just romantic. Alliances with powerful figures, whether producers, directors, or well-connected individuals, could offer a lifeline, better roles, positive publicity, or protection from the whims of studio heads. Her relationship with the powerful and notoriously womanizing billionaire Howard Hughes, which she publicly acknowledged, fits this pattern. While her feelings were likely genuine, such a connection with one of the most influential men in aviation and film was also a strategic asset, a fact not lost on industry gossips. Similarly, a marriage to a respected director like Paget could have been seen as a potential career move, a way to transition into more serious roles under a husband's guidance. Her final marriage to Ling Kung represented a clean and final break from Hollywood altogether, a retreat into a completely different world of private business and ultimately faith. Thus, her love life can be interpreted not just as a series of romantic failures, but as a navigating path through the treacherous waters of fame, a search for love certainly, but also for security, career advancement, and finally a complete escape from the industry that had defined and confined her since she was a child. Debra Paget's decision to decline Elvis Presley's marriage proposal was far more than a simple romantic rejection. It became a pivotal piece of Hollywood lore, generating waves of gossip and speculation that rippled through the industry and continue to fascinate fans decades later. The intrigue stemmed from a perfect storm of factors: the towering stature of the suitor, the unconventional reasons for the refusal, and the uncanny, almost surreal consequence that followed. At the heart of the story was the undeniable authenticity of Presley's interest. By 1956, Elvis was not just a rising star. He was a cultural atom bomb, a figure for whom agitation was a constant. For him to become genuinely infatuated with his co-star to the point of proposing marriage signaled a profound and serious attraction. He wasn't merely pursuing another Hollywood starlet. He saw in Paget, as the transcript notes, the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. And his visits to her parents' home demonstrated a traditional and earnest courtship. This made her rejection not just a personal slight, but a stunning defiance of the predictable narrative that any woman would be thrilled to be chosen by the king. The reasons behind her refusal became prime fodder for the Hollywood rumor mill. Paget's own explanation that she obeyed her parents' objections was a quaint, almost anachronistic concept in the rebellious spirit of rock and roll, making it seem like a cover for a more complex truth. This truth, as historians and gossip columnists alike quickly seized upon, was her simultaneous involvement with the reclusive billionaire and legendary Hollywood wolf, Howard Hughes. To choose Hughes over Presley was a breathtaking power move. It was a choice of old-world enigmatic power and immense wealth, Hughes, over new-world explosive fame and heartthrob status, Presley. This framed Paget not as a passive ingenue, but as a woman with calculated, if not controversial, ambitions, making the story infinitely more spicy than a simple no. However, the most lasting and eerily poetic layer of this intrigue was the physical resemblance between Debra Paget and Priscilla Beaulieu, the young woman Elvis would meet in Germany just a few years later and eventually marry. The similarity was not subtle. Both possessed the same dark, sculpted eyebrows, the same pale complexion contrasted with jet-black hair, the same delicate features and exotic aura. Paget herself acknowledged the bizarre coincidence, remarking that they could have been triplets. This created a compelling and somewhat unsettling psychological narrative that Elvis, heartbroken by his inability to win Paget, sought out and molded a look-alike. It transformed a simple romantic disappointment into a deep-seated obsession, feeding into the mythos of Elvis's loneliness and his desire for a pure, almost idealized woman he could protect and shape. The gossip columns and fan magazines thrived on this almost soap opera-level intrigue, painting a picture of a love story denied by circumstance only to be replaced by a living echo. This narrative cemented Debra Paget's place not just as a star in her own right, but as a crucial what-if tragedy of Elvis Presley's life, a ghost of a choice that forever altered the course of his personal history.